My name is Cordelia Haynes, and I'm sitting across from my boss, Thaddeus Morse, as he slides a sheet of paper across his glossy desk toward me. It's my annual review, and I've been with this marketing consultancy for 8 long years. He's wearing that particular look he gets when he believes he's about to drop crushing news, like a cat who's finally cornered its prey. "We're cutting your salary in half," he says, leaning back in his leather chair. "Take it or leave it. The figure on that paper is so low it wouldn't even cover my rent." I glance up at him, and he's actually grinning. 8 years of 60-hour weeks, of salvaging his reputation countless times, of being the one every client truly speaks to while he takes credit for everything I do. 8 years, and this is what he thinks I'm worth. "I understand," I reply evenly. "When does this begin?" His grin stretches wider. "Immediately." I nod and fold the paper carefully. "Perfect timing," I tell him, and something flickers in his expression because my reaction isn't at all what he expected. Before I go deeper into what happened, please take a moment to tell me in the comments where you're listening from, because I want to know where my story is reaching people across the world. And also like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon, because what I'm about to reveal will show you exactly how someone can believe they hold all the power, only to discover they never had any at all. See, what Thaddeus didn't realize, as he sat there trying to humiliate me, was that 3 weeks earlier, I had received a call from Elena Voss. Elena runs the most successful marketing firm in our city, and she'd been observing my work for years. Not Thaddeus's work, mine. Because everyone in this industry knows who actually delivers results, even when someone else's name is plastered on the door. "Cordelia," Elena had said during our coffee meeting, "I want to offer you something different. Not just a job, a partnership. I'm expanding, and I need someone who understands that real business is built on relationships, not arrogance." I hadn't given her an answer that day. I told her I needed time to consider it. But sitting there watching Thaddeus dismantle 8 years of commitment with a single sheet of paper, Elena's offer suddenly felt like the universe aligning perfectly. You have to understand something about Thaddeus Morse. He inherited this company from his father 12 years ago. Never spent a single day in client services. Never had to win over a difficult customer or stay up all night repairing someone else's blunder. He's one of those men who thinks showing up and having his name on the building automatically makes him irreplaceable. What he never understood is that for the past 3 years, I've been running his entire operation. Not officially, of course. Officially, I'm a senior account manager. But in reality, every major decision funnels through me first. Every crisis gets solved by me before it even touches his radar. Every client relationship exists because I built it brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Take our biggest account, Piton Industries. Their CEO, Janet Piton, believes she has a direct line to the company owner because that's exactly how I structured it. When she calls with an urgent issue, she asks for me by name. When she's pleased with our work, she sends thank you notes addressed to me personally. Thaddeus gets copied on emails, sure, but Janet and I are the ones who actually resolve problems together. Or take Morrison Tech, our second largest client. I've been their main contact for 4 years. I know the founder's daughter just started college. I remember his wife's chemotherapy schedule. I send congratulations when their quarterly results surpass expectations. Thaddeus shows up to the annual dinner and makes small talk, but Morrison calls me when he needs genuine guidance. This pattern repeats across our entire client list, 23 major accounts, and every single relationship runs through me. Not because I'm some expert manipulator, but because I sincerely care about their success. I remember details. I follow up on concerns. I deliver what I say I will, exactly when I say I will. But here's what truly made Thaddeus exposed, and what he never anticipated. The suppliers and vendors who keep his company operating also work mainly with me. When we need printing on short notice, I call Jameson at Premier Graphics personally. When we need last-minute catering for a client event, Rosa at Artisan Foods recognizes my voice. When our computers malfunction, Marcus from Texture asks for me specifically because he knows I'll describe the issue clearly and treat his technicians with respect. These aren't just business connections. They're human relationships built over years of steady, considerate interaction. While Thaddeus was playing golf and attending networking events where he'd pass out business cards to people who'd forget him within a week, I was creating a foundation of genuine professional relationships based on ability and mutual respect. Even his employees gravitate toward me. When someone's confused about a project, they come to my office. When there's a clash between departments, they ask if I can mediate. When people think about quitting, they confide in me first. Not because I positioned myself as some alternative authority figure, but because I actually listen and help resolve issues instead of simply delegating them to someone else. The week after my meeting with Elena, I started paying closer attention to just how much of Thaddeus's business depended on me personally. It was overwhelming. I was copied on at least 90% of significant emails. My phone number was the one most clients had saved. My relationships were the ones that brought in repeat business and referrals. I realized that Thaddeus had made a classic mistake. He'd built a business where he was the visible front, but I was the true foundation. Remove me, and everything else had nothing solid to stand on. So when he slid that salary cut across his desk with such blatant satisfaction, when he stared at me like I was some disposable employee who should be grateful for whatever scraps he tossed my way, I knew exactly what I was going to do. Perfect timing, I'd said, and I meant every word. I stood up from his office that day and walked straight to my desk. I opened my computer and typed a concise, professional email to Elena Voss. I accept your partnership offer. When would you like me to begin? Her reply came back within 20 minutes. How about Monday? It was Thursday. That afternoon, I submitted my formal resignation to Human Resources. 2 weeks' notice, as required by my contract. Courteous, professional, giving him time to transition my responsibilities to someone else. Of course, what Thaddeus didn't understand was that my responsibilities couldn't actually be passed along. You can't transfer 8 years of relationship building in a 2-week handover period. When I told him I was leaving, he barely glanced up from his computer. Fine, he said. We'll manage without you. I nearly laughed. Nearly. Instead, I spent my last 2 weeks being the most cooperative departing employee in corporate history. I documented every project I was handling. I created detailed client profiles with contact information and background. I wrote thorough guides for maintaining vendor relationships. I organized my files precisely and left clear instructions for whoever would inherit my accounts. What I didn't do was transfer the actual relationships themselves because you can't transfer trust. You can't document the fact that Janet Peaton calls me when she's frustrated because she knows I'll genuinely listen and uncover solutions. You can't write a manual explaining that Morrison relies on my judgment because I've never led him astray. You can't hand over the respect I've earned from suppliers who know that when I promise something, it gets done. On my final day, I cleaned out my desk while Thaddeus was in a meeting. I took my personal belongings, my diplomas, a few plants I'd brought to brighten the space. I left behind all the company property, all the client files, all the business records. I wasn't taking anything. I was simply no longer available to be the invisible structure holding everything together. I shook hands with colleagues, hugged a few people I'd worked closely with, and walked out precisely at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. Monday morning, I began my new role as Elena's partner at Voss Associates. We'd restructured the partnership so I'd have equity and decision-making authority from day one. My new office had windows that actually opened, a coffee machine that worked, and a partner who valued competence over ego. By Tuesday, my old phone number was disconnected, routed to a generic company voicemail. By Wednesday, things at Thaddeus's company started getting interesting. Janet Peaton called the main office looking for me. The receptionist transferred her to Thaddeus, who had no idea why she was calling or what project she meant. Janet hung up, puzzled, and then called the Morrison Tech CEO to ask if he knew what was going on. Morrison called the office Thursday morning with a question about an upcoming campaign launch. Thaddeus took the call himself, trying to sound informed, but it became clear within 5 minutes that he didn't understand the details of his own company's project. Morrison asked to speak with someone who was actually familiar with his account. There wasn't anyone. By Friday of that first week, 3 more major clients had called with questions or concerns and received equally unhelpful replies. 2 vendors called about overdue payments that I normally would have handled. The IT support company arrived for a scheduled maintenance visit that Thaddeus had forgotten was on the calendar. I know all this because people started calling me directly, not to complain about Thaddeus exactly, but to ask if I knew what was happening. Janet Peaton tracked down my new number through a mutual contact and called to congratulate me on my new role. During that conversation, she mentioned how odd it was that my previous company suddenly seemed so chaotic. "It's like they forgot how to do business," she said. "Nobody there seems to know what's going on anymore." I listened politely but didn't offer any explanations. What was I supposed to say? That Thaddeus had spent 8 years taking credit for work he couldn't actually perform himself. The second week was when the real trouble began. One of their largest suppliers, the printing company I'd worked with for years, called about a past due payment. Thaddeus apparently became defensive and rude, implying they should be more patient about the money. Jameson, the owner, called me that afternoon. "Cordelia, I don't know what's happening over there, but that's not how we're used to being treated. If this is how they want to operate going forward, we may need to reconsider our relationship." I kept my professional boundaries intact. "That sounds like a discussion you should have with them directly, Jameson. I'm not involved with their business anymore." But of course, I also mentioned that my new firm was looking for a dependable printing partner. And would he be open to talking about a possible partnership? This is where people sometimes misunderstand what happened next. I didn't undermine Thaddeus's business. I didn't steal his clients or insult his company. I simply began building relationships in my new position the same way I had always built relationships, by being capable, consistent, and genuinely supportive. When Janet Peaton mentioned she was irritated with the lack of communication from her current marketing firm, I listened. When she asked if my new company might be open to discussing her account, I said we'd be glad to have that conversation. When Morrison Tech's CEO called to congratulate me on my new venture and asked about our capabilities, I was straightforward about what we could deliver. Within 3 weeks of leaving Thaddeus's company, Elena and I had arranged meetings with 4 of his former clients. Not because I lured them away, but because they approached us after becoming increasingly disappointed with the service they were receiving. The beautiful thing about building authentic relationships is that people remember how you made them feel. When they're getting poor treatment from one provider, they naturally think about someone who consistently provided excellent service. It's not corporate sabotage or unethical competition. It's simply basic human nature. By the end of my first month at Voss Associates, we'd signed 3 new major accounts. All of them happened to be companies I'd previously worked with, companies that had become frustrated with their current marketing firm's inability to offer the level of service they were used to. The turning point came when Morrison Tech made the switch. Their CEO called Thaddeus personally to explain that they'd be moving their account to a firm that better understood their needs. Thaddeus apparently turned hostile, accusing Morrison of being influenced by a former employee. Morrison called me that afternoon laughing. "Cordelia, that man just proved exactly why we made the right decision. He spent 10 minutes yelling at me about employee loyalty and competitive ethics, but he couldn't answer a single question about our actual business requirements. It's like he never understood what we do or why we hired his company in the first place." That's when I realized what was really happening. He hadn't just lost me as an employee, he'd lost the person who acted as the translator between his ego and the actual requirements of running a company. Without me there to bridge that gap, clients were getting unfiltered exposure to his incompetence. The stories started circulating back to me through industry contacts. How Thaddeus had forgotten about a major presentation and tried to improvise with outdated data. How he'd promised deliverables his remaining team couldn't possibly meet because they didn't have the client relationships required to gather information. How he bungled a crisis situation that I would have resolved with a few simple calls. Each misstep made my former clients more grateful for the level of service they were now receiving from Elena and me. Each interaction with Thaddeus reminded them why they had actually appreciated working with his firm when I had been the one quietly making everything function. 6 weeks after I left, I bumped into one of my former co-workers at a coffee shop. She looked exhausted. "Cordelia, it's chaos over there," she said. "Thaddeus keeps telling us to handle things you used to do, but none of us know how. Half the vendors won't return our messages. Clients are constantly asking where you went, and Thaddeus just keeps saying, 'We need to figure it out because business has to move forward.'" I felt genuinely sorry for her and the others who were dealing with the aftermath of his mismanagement. They were good people stuck in an impossible situation. "Are you looking for other opportunities?" I asked. "Everyone is," she said. "But Thaddeus has started making threats about non-competes and legal action if anyone else leaves." That's when I knew he was genuinely panicking. Empty legal threats are what incompetent leaders reach for when they realize they've lost control of a situation they never truly understood. Elena and I began receiving calls from talented people at his firm. Not because I was recruiting them, but because word had spread about our growing success and positive work environment. When people feel trapped in a sinking operation, they naturally drift toward opportunities that appear stable and rewarding. We hired 3 of his former employees over the next month. All of them gave proper notice. All of them were released from any legitimate contractual restrictions, and all of them were eager to work somewhere their abilities would be respected rather than ignored. With each new hire, we gained deeper institutional awareness about accounts that were struggling at the old company. Not proprietary data or confidential secrets, but general industry knowledge and professional insight these individuals had gained over years of experience. The final domino fell when Peaton Industries made their choice to switch agencies. Janet called me personally to explain their decision. "Cordelia, we've been trying to make it work with your old company for 2 months now, but it's like working with strangers. Nobody there understands our business or our history. Every conversation starts from scratch. We're paying premium prices for amateur results." When Elena and I secured the Peaton account, we became the fastest-growing marketing firm in the city. In 3 months, we'd gone from a small boutique operation to a major force in the local market. All because Thaddeus Morse believed slashing my salary would teach me my place. The last time I saw him was at an industry networking event about 4 months after I had left his firm. He looked awful, stressed, drained, defensive. When he spotted me across the room, he actually tried to approach. "Cordelia," he said, "we need to talk." I was courteous but firm. "I don't think there's anything for us to discuss." "You ruined my business," he said loudly enough that people nearby turned to listen. I looked at him steadily. "I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped fixing everything." That was the moment he fully understood. I could see it in his expression. For 8 years, he'd been running a company where his most important contribution was staying out of my way while I kept things functioning. When he pushed me out, he lost the only person who had been shielding his incompetence from becoming visible to his clients. He didn't lose his business because I sabotaged it. He lost it because he had never actually been running it in the first place. The room around us had grown silent. Others in our industry were listening to a conversation that perfectly demonstrated why some companies thrive while others collapse. It had nothing to do with revenge or corporate warfare. It had everything to do with recognizing that lasting success comes from real competence and authentic relationships, not from titles and ego and illusions of authority. I excused myself politely and returned to Elena's conversation with a potential new client. 6 months later, I heard from industry contacts that Thaddeus had been forced to sell what remained of his company to a larger firm. The brand name disappeared entirely. His father's legacy, built over decades, was gone. But here's the part most people misunderstand about this story. I never intended to destroy Thaddeus Morse or his company. I never crafted some elaborate revenge plan. I simply refused to continue supporting someone who treated me as disposable while relying completely on my work to maintain his reputation. The most devastating revenge isn't what you do to someone. It's what unfolds when you finally stop doing everything on their behalf. Today, 2 years later, Elena and I run the most successful marketing consultancy across 3 states. We have 47 employees, offices in 2 cities, and a client waitlist stretching nearly 6 months. Forbes highlighted us in an article about women-owned companies transforming their industries. The local business journal even named me Entrepreneur of the Year. But that isn't the twist I want to share. The real twist is what happened to Thaddeus after his company collapsed, and how it led to the most unexpected phone call I've ever received. Remember how I mentioned he was forced to sell whatever was left of his business? What I didn't know then was who ended up buying it. Turns out it was purchased by Meridian Holdings, one of those enormous corporate investment groups that scoop up failing companies, strip them for assets, and either flip them or shut them down completely. Thaddeus walked away with just enough money to clear his debts and maybe survive 6 more months. Not exactly the cushy retirement he probably pictured when he inherited his father's firm. For nearly a year after that, I didn't hear anything about him. Occasionally, someone would mention spotting him at networking events trying to patch up his reputation, but nobody took him seriously anymore. Word spreads quickly in our industry, and everyone already knew what had truly happened to his company. Then, about 8 months ago, something unusual began happening. I started receiving calls from headhunters asking if I could provide insight into Thaddeus Morse's background and work history. Apparently, he was applying for senior leadership roles at various firms. And his resume made it sound like he'd been some kind of visionary executive who built a thriving agency before choosing to pursue new challenges. I was always honest with those recruiters. I explained that while Thaddeus technically owned a company, he hadn't been very involved in daily operations or client relationships. I never insulted him personally, but I didn't help him craft a fictional narrative about his abilities either. Most of those calls ended with the recruiter thanking me and moving on to other candidates. But then, 3 months ago, I received a call that completely stunned me. Miss Haynes, this is Patricia Williams from Blackstone Associates. We're an executive search firm, and we're hoping you might assist with a rather unusual situation. Blackstone Associates is one of the most respected headhunting firms in the nation. They place CEOs and senior executives at Fortune 500 companies. I had no idea why they were reaching out to me. We've been retained by a client to find a chief marketing officer, Patricia continued. It's a major role with extensive responsibility and compensation. Based on our research, we believe you might be the ideal candidate. I was flattered but puzzled. I appreciate the offer, but I'm very satisfied with my current work. I'm a partner at my own firm. We understand, she replied, and we respect your accomplishments. But this opportunity is exceptional. Our client is searching for someone with your specific blend of relationship-building ability and operational expertise. The compensation begins at $400,000 annually, plus equity and bonuses. That definitely caught my attention, not because I wanted to leave Elena or our company, but because an offer like that meant they were serious about finding someone extraordinary. Can you tell me who the client is? I asked. That's where things become sensitive, she said. The role is with Meridian Holdings, specifically to oversee marketing operations for their recently acquired businesses. They're seeking someone who can repair client relationships and restore operational structure to companies that have suffered under poor management. I nearly dropped the phone. Meridian Holdings, the firm that had bought Thaddeus's company. I'm not sure that particular role is a good fit for me, I said carefully. Miss Haynes, please at least consider meeting with them. They're prepared to offer significant autonomy and resources, and frankly, they specifically requested you by name after reviewing your work and reputation. That evening, I discussed everything with Elena. The entire situation felt unreal. They want you to rehabilitate companies ruined by incompetent leadership, Elena said. That's actually a fascinating position. You'd be doing what you used to do for Thaddeus, but for multiple organizations, and with real recognition and proper compensation. And as for working for the company that bought his firm, why does that bother you? It just feels strange, I admitted. Cordelia, you didn't make his business collapse. You simply stopped preventing it from collapsing. If Meridian Holdings realize they need someone with your abilities to fix similar problems, that's a compliment to your expertise. I decided to take the meeting, mostly out of curiosity. Meridian Holdings' office was in a downtown skyscraper with sweeping views of the entire city. Patricia Williams greeted me in the lobby and escorted me to the 42nd floor, where I met David Chen, the regional director overseeing their latest acquisitions. David wasn't anything like what I expected. Mid-40s, calm, highly informed about organizational structures. He had clearly studied my background and the situation with Thaddeus's company. Cordelia, thank you for coming. I want to be completely candid about why we're interested in you. He pulled out a thick binder and set it on the conference table between us. Over the last 18 months, Meridian has acquired 7 small to mid-sized companies in different sectors. All of them were failing when we bought them, and all of them showed the same underlying pattern of dysfunction. Skilled employees being undervalued by ego-driven leadership. Strong client relationships being ignored or mishandled. Operational expertise being pushed aside in favor of superficial leadership. He opened the folder and revealed detailed analyses of each acquisition. In every case, we found that the true value of the company lived in the relationships and skill sets of mid-level employees who were never properly supported or compensated. When we attempted to rebuild these companies using standard management strategies, we struggled to restore the client trust and operational stability that had originally made them successful. I could already see where this conversation was headed. You want me to help you identify and retain the individuals who actually kept those companies running. Precisely. But beyond that, we want you to create a structured approach for restoring companies that have lost their operational core due to ineffective leadership. We believe you understand something about business relationships that most executives completely overlook. David leaned forward in his chair. We've studied what happened with your former employer's organization, not to assign guilt, but to understand the internal dynamics that caused such a rapid collapse. What we uncovered was remarkable. He pulled out another report. This one centered specifically on Thaddeus's company. Before you left, that business had steady revenue growth, strong client retention, and reliable supplier connections. Within 6 months of your departure, all of those indicators dropped sharply. But here's what really caught our eye. The clients who transitioned to your new firm reported higher satisfaction and better outcomes than they'd ever experienced before. I remained unsure where he was steering this. That tells us you weren't merely preserving existing relationships. You were delivering a level of service that surpassed what those clients had previously received, even while operating under someone else's structure. And what does that have to do with Meridian Holdings? David smiled. We want to give you the authority and resources to do for our acquired companies what you did for your own business. Identify real talent, rebuild genuine relationships, and create long-term operational strength based on competence, not ego or hierarchy. The offer was even more significant than Patricia had suggested. A $400,000 base salary, plus performance bonuses that could double that amount, plus equity in the companies I successfully restored. I would have a team of analysts and operational experts. I would report directly to David with full autonomy over hiring, firing, and strategic decision-making for the marketing operations of all acquired properties. But the most intriguing part of the offer was what David said next. There's one more thing, Cordelia. We have a particular situation that might interest you on a personal level. He pulled out one final document. 3 weeks ago, we acquired another struggling marketing firm. The person running it had been trying to rebuild his reputation after his previous company imploded, but he repeated many of the same leadership failures. Skilled employees leaving, client trust eroding, operational chaos. My heartbeat quickened. The manager's name is Thaddeus Morris. I stared at David in complete disbelief. You purchased the company Thaddeus works for? Actually, he never owned it. He had been hired as the general manager by a group of investors who assumed his experience running a prior agency would be valuable. When that arrangement fell apart, the investors approached us to acquire the assets and restore the business. David flipped open the document to show financial summaries and operational evaluations. The company has potential, a solid client list, strong staff, good infrastructure, but it's suffering from the same leadership issues that destroyed his last company. The employees don't trust management. Clients are fed up with uneven service, and no one seems to know how to coordinate the moving pieces. I could barely process what he was saying. You want me to take over the company where Thaddeus works? We want you to rebuild it correctly. What happens to Mr. Morris would be entirely your choice as the operational director. You'd have full authority over the staffing and leadership structure. The irony was so perfect it almost didn't feel real. The universe was handing me the chance to become Thaddeus's superior, to control his professional future, to determine whether he stayed or left. It was the ultimate revenge scenario, delivered to me on a silver platter. And that's when I realized something important about who I had become. I didn't want it. Not because I wasn't upset about how he treated me, not because I believed he deserved a second chance, but because accepting that role would mean dedicating my energy to repairing damages caused by someone else's incompetence, instead of continuing to build something meaningful with Elena. David, I'm genuinely honored by this proposal. The compensation is impressive, the role is demanding, and I can see how it would be professionally fulfilling. I paused to collect my thoughts, but I've invested 8 years of my career boosting someone else's ego and fixing mistakes I never caused. I'm not willing to repeat that, even with better pay and acknowledgement. David looked let down, but not shocked. I completely understand. We had to extend the offer because you're precisely the kind of leader we need, but we respect your choice to prioritize your own company's expansion. As I exited the building, Patricia walked me to the elevator. Can I ask you something off the record? She asked. Go ahead. When David mentioned the Thaddeus Morse situation, I noticed your expression shift. Was there some personal history that made the offer less appealing? I reflected on that question as the elevator dropped 42 floors. Actually, it was the opposite. I told her, the personal history made me realize that the best revenge isn't gaining power over someone who harmed you. It's creating something so successful that their opinion of you becomes completely meaningless. 6 months later, Elena and I launched our third office. We now employ 63 people, including 12 former employees from various companies that Meridian Holdings has acquired and transformed. Our client list includes Fortune 500 companies, and we've been contacted by 3 separate investment firms about expansion possibilities. Last month, I received an invitation to speak at the National Marketing Association's annual conference about sustainable growth and genuine leadership, the keynote speech to an audience of 1,500 industry professionals. Thaddeus will likely be in that crowd. He still shows up at industry events, still attempts to network his way into fresh opportunities. If he's there, he'll watch me earn recognition for the expertise he never bothered to value when he had the chance. But here's what I've discovered about real success. It's not about proving anything to those who underestimated you. It's about building something so substantial and purposeful that their validation becomes irrelevant. The best revenge isn't ruining someone who wronged you. It's becoming so successful that you stop remembering they exist. And when you do recall them, you realize their ability to harm you vanished the moment you stopped seeking their approval. That salary cut Thaddeus gave me 2 years ago was meant to remind me of my place. Instead, it reminded me of my value. If this story connected with you, Please share it with someone who needs the message. Leave a comment telling me about a moment when someone underestimated you and how that experience shifted your view of your own potential. And if you're currently in a situation where you feel overlooked or taken for granted, remember that the strongest thing you can do is stop shrinking yourself to fit someone else's insecurity. Your worth isn't defined by how others treat you. It's defined by what you choose to build once you finally decide you deserve better.